can.
Because having read the document, it looks like you'll put new signs over the door of FÁS. And what else will you do for these workers?
Martin let FÁS run reckless. We had a situation where gross unfairness existed in this country, where a former senior person in FÁS was able to walk out the door with £1 million.
Okay, which is immaterial to what you're going to do.
Excuse me, yes. What Fine Gael are going to do for those who are unemployed now, who are involved in the construction sector, be they carpenters, be they welders, be they apprentices who had not finished the certification, we're going to give those second chance employment. We're going to give them second chance training, and we've set out the number of places in our programme for that. We're also going to give young unemployed graduates who have no work the opportunity to enter into work at the lower level of pay to get experience 20 hours a week, be they architects, be they engineers, be they graphic designers or whatever else. The number of unemployed, unfinished apprentices in Laois Offaly, we will complete those certifications either through the Board of Works or through the colleges.
Right, but they still have to find jobs after
yes,
that.
You
and
do.
on page 37
yes.
of your document
yes.
yesterday, you talk about changing the traditional centralised FÁS structure. In other words, changing the signs over the door, literally. But what will that achieve for people?
FÁS went wrong at the top, and you know that.
That's not an issue. The issue is what are you going to do about it?
It's been the cause and the lead role where false certificates were issued for training courses, where people left FÁS courses in particular areas of the country, assuming that they had got a certificate of competency in a particular course, and that wasn't the case. Now, let me focus on unemployment here in Laois Offaly. We recognise that you have to remove the burdens on employers if you're going to give any kind of facility or ease or encouragement here.
Yeah, and again, you talk about cutting red tape.
We've got 80,000 small firms in the country. They employ 800,000 people. What is wrong that each one of these cannot employ one more person?
Well, you talk about measures such as cutting red tape. And again,
yes.
I've gone through your document. You refer to simplifying a few forms,
yes.
merging a few regulators.
Yes.
Aside from that, what are you going to do to cut red tape, so-called?
I'll tell you what I'm going to do. I'll tell you. I'll give you an example. In a small shop, 150 square feet, newspapers, retail, magazines, coffee, and the usual things. When I spoke to that man, I said, what is it that the state could do to help you? He said, I'll tell you. I want one certificate on that wall to say that I'm a compliant retailer. At the moment, I have 21 licenses to get to run a shop twice the size of this studio. Now, that's not good.
Okay, but under one roof, and that's what you propose to do, is put all this under one roof. Will he still have to jump through the same number of hoops, the same number of tests to get one certificate instead of 20?
There's no reason why you have to have 21 inspections, 21 visits, 21 filling of forms and all the rest of it. In the same way as if somebody here in Laois Offaly is starting off a small business, why do they have to go through all the complications of 25-page tax forms when in other countries you have a simplified version to get the culture of startups encouraged and give people that opportunity?
Okay, that will cut down on red tape. That will cut down on frustration. But how does it save business cost?
Well, the costs of red tape to Irish business are computed at 500 million. At 500 million. Now, there are 1,500
so
offices.
their HR department works a little bit less in filling out all these forms.
Yes, but you walk into a social welfare office, take down your name, take down all your details, go down the road to the HSE, fill it in again, go up for a medical card, fill it in again, go somewhere else for dental treatment, go somewhere else for school transport, fill them all in again.
Right, so you'll streamline that. But what about rents? Because on page 50 you say, we realise there are legal pitfalls to this policy of ignoring the upward-only rent review and that constitutional issues may arise. We are prepared to take that risk and take the challenge to the Supreme Court. That's not very reassuring. What if the Supreme Court finds against you?
Because you're contracted into in many cases where rents were reviewed on an upward basis only.
Yeah, but it sounds like you're taking a legal experiment here.
But what you want to do here is take the case on behalf of the people who say the circumstances are not the way they were. I feel I should be entitled either to a freeze in rent or a reduction in rent.
Why not make the law airtight beforehand?
Legislate for that, and if it's challenged in the courts, then the courts determine its constitutionality or not. I'm not the arbitrator of that.
Okay. Would you favour that? You, for instance, propose that the Constitution would be amended to bring in a whole variety of changes. Why not include that when you have your Constitution?
Well, you draft the law, and if it's challenged in the court, you don't determine the time that actually goes in before it. In respect to the Constitution, we've made this perfectly clear. 2.5 years ago, when I proposed the abolition of the Seanad, it wasn't very well accepted, and now I'm glad to see that all parties agree with my philosophy on this. I've said that inside 12 months, we would have a Constitution Day, which would deal with asking the people to get rid of Shannon Éireann, which would save 25 million a year, and actually give the opportunity to have.
Yeah, but look, in the grand scheme of things, they're small figures, and they're very small figures compared to the banking situation.
They're sore for the people, and let me lead on from that.
But let's touch on the banking situation.
We have the situation arising from Abbey Lara, which has got to be dealt with. We'll put that to a referendum, thereby giving Dáil committees real power, and thereby cutting down on the number of tribunals at enormous cost to you and the taxpayers around the country.
Okay, the bank issue is one of the biggest that people have complained about. And let's look at why we can't borrow at reasonable rates in the first place, which is this state guarantee covering senior bondholders. Does Fine Gael believe in the concept of co-responsibility?
It's not the reason why we can't borrow money at low.
Do you believe in co-responsibility? And co-responsibility in banking terms is where people who loan to banks are just as responsible as those who borrow from them.
I'll deal with that now in a second for you. The first reason we can't borrow money as a country is because this country was let out of control. The government failed in its duty.
Do you believe in co-responsibility, sir?
I'm answering, first of all, for you, Will. If you want to go down this road in this interview, the reason we can't borrow money is because the government let the country run out of control, and the IMF have come to our shores and taken away our sovereignty. So we're completely constrained for 2011 and 2012. The one element that's of any value out of all that has been the truth.
Okay, I'm going to ask this question again then. Why should the people of this country continue to shoulder the burden of this bailout through higher taxes, reduced services?
The reason that they have to now carry that burden is that the country can't borrow money and the banks can't borrow money because of incompetence at government level. We denied it in the chamber of the Dáil that the IMF were at our shores.
Again, you are evading the question of co-responsibility. Do you believe that these foreign banks lending recklessly to Irish institutions bear any responsibility at all in this? And will you decouple, therefore, private debt from the state?
The banks, the ECB lent serious money to Irish banks. Obviously, banks lending huge amounts of money to Irish banks, and indeed banks lending money on to consumers. The banks knew they were lending too much, and the consumer knew they were borrowing too much. That's an element of the crisis that we've got to deal with.
Yes, but Enda Kenny, the Irish state is solvent. The banks are insolvent. Are you going to continue to make the Irish state insolvent by linking this private debt to the public?
There is culpability in many quarters here. That's why I went out to Brussels last week to talk to the President of the Commission.
Okay.
Excuse me now.
Can I get a yes or no? Will you answer the question, please? Will you continue this situation where the Irish state will be saddled with private debt, or will you break that link?
That's why I want to renegotiate the deal that we're now saddled with. If you listen to me...
Will you give me a yes or a no on that point and then expand on it?
No, I will expand on it.
Will you give me a yes or a no
first?
first?
That's why I went out to meet the President of the Commission.
You won't give us a yes or a no on whether you will break the link between private banking debt and the state.
If you want to take that line, you can continue to do so. I'm telling you...
Again, it's your privilege not to answer that question, but it is apparent to people that you are unwilling to give an answer.
You want to make that comment, that's fine. I'm telling you that while others were talking about other issues here, I went to Brussels to signal our intent clearly and got the consent of the President of the Commission that if the Fine Gael party is elected to government, we go back there and talk about what has to be done to get this deal in a more amenable fashion for Irish taxpayers.
In a more amenable fashion, but that's separate. That's separate from this issue of the bank debt.
I don't want to see a situation.
You clearly won't answer that question then on whether Fine Gael will release the Irish taxpayer of this burden of bank debt.
Fine Gael have already made it perfectly clear that those bond holders who have invested in banks, who have by virtue of the blanket guarantee given by the government, have laughed their way all the way to the future.
Right. And what are you doing about it?
Well, there are a number of options here. One is to burden bondholders, as they say. That's called burden sharing in European speak, if you like. Legislation is already underway from the Commission on that, but that's quite a distance out. As far as I'm concerned, I want to see those bondholders pay some of this price, particularly, as we pointed out 2 months ago in Brussels, those bond investors who are now out of guarantee, but in respect of which the Irish taxpayer is still having to pay. I hope I make myself clear in that regard.
Senior bondholders or subordinated bondholders?
We lead on from that to the point where there are proposals coming from the Commission itself and from other quarters. The German Commissioner says extend the loans over a greater period. Chancellor Merkel says, why don't you put into your constitution a deficit break and legally bind future governments from reckless lending. Others say, and these are proposals, where you might take the tracker mortgages and remove them from the banks.
What will you do?
What I'll do is I'll go back with my team to Brussels and negotiate on all these issues for two fundamental
but
points.
we don't really
One
know
is
your
the
position before you go out there, before you're elected.
Excuse me. This is an important matter you're talking about. There is nobody in Europe has all the answers here. Nobody. And my view is that politics is about compromise. The Irish people have now a crushing burden put on their backs by virtue of government incompetence. That's now being denied by the new leader of Fianna Fáil. I'm prepared to go back to Brussels if I'm given that responsibility and negotiate on a range of these issues to ease the burden for the Irish taxpayer.